In this video, we're going to animate our character. Notice that it's idle right now and it's just kind of moving up and down. And if I run to the right, I can make it run to the right. And if I run to the left, I can make it run to the left. Now it isn't moving yet. Our character is not moving yet. But we will get to that. Right now, we're just going to work on the animation. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to need is several different folders in our assets folder. So in the project pane down here, click on assets and create a new folder. The first one is our animations folder. I'll create a second folder. The second one is my sprites folder. And I need a third one folder. This will be for my scripts. So hopefully you've done that. You've created 3 folders: animation, scripts, and sprites. Great, now we'll go into the scenes folder. To get our character running, we're going to put it in an empty scene. So I'm going to right click, create a scene, and I'm just going to call it empty. Great, and I will double click it. And we're just going to quickly set some things up so it looks like the rest of our scenes. I'll go to the main camera and set the size to 7. Next, just so I can get some platforms in here, I'm going to right click and 2D tile map. Remember, we set our grid to 2 by 2. And I'm just going to put a couple of platforms in here. So I'm going to grab a platform and put a couple in there. And that's really all I need for now. Actually, I'm going to close this tile palette. So I'll right click and close the tab. That's going to give me more room to look at our character here. Okay, next let's find our sprites. First we're going to do the idle sprite here. So I'm going to go into the Bayit Games folder, and if I find character animation, there's character animation, there's idle, jump, and run. We'll be using all of them, but for right now I'm going to go to idle. And there's one time. Right now, if you look at this, it's just one sprite sheet. What we need to do is cut it up. Before we do that, I want to do a couple things. First, I want to rename it to idle sprite. Next, with idle sprite selected, I'm going to come over to my pixels per unit, and I'm going to change it to 48. That's going to be the right size for us. Now, I want to move this idle sprite into my sprites folder. So I'm going to close the Bayit Games folder, grab idle sprites, put it in my sprites folder. Great, now I'll go to my sprites folder and select it. And over here in the inspector, the sprite mode is set to single. I need to change that to multiple. And then I'm going to go to my sprite editor. Oops, I needed to click apply there. So if this pops up, make sure you click apply. And here's all my sprites. They're not cut up yet, so I need to slice them up. Fortunately, there's a button right here that says slice. So I click here and just leave it on automatic and click slice. Now if I come down here, I can click on each object and it is sliced up. Great. All I have to do now is click apply and close it. Now look, if I open up my sprites here, you can see all of them. Before we create our animation, we need to create our object. So in my hierarchy, I'm going to right click and create empty. And I'm going to name it my character. My character is going to need some components to make it work, so I'm going to come over here and click Add Component. The first thing I want to do is add a sprite renderer so I can see what it is. Sprite renderer. And while I'm remembering, I'm going to transform the location, so I'm going to right click and click Reset on the transform so it's 0, 0, 0. Now it does need a sprite, and all I have to do is grab any one of these. You grab whichever one you want. I'm going to grab the first item and just drag it into my sprite area. Now I can see my character, and I will move it over the top of the platform that I created. Here. At this point, I want to change the order in layer here to 1 so I can see it correctly. Before we go any farther, I want to talk to you about some terminology Unity uses for animations. And there's a couple things we need to learn about. Number one is an animator component. This is what actually assigns animations to game objects. And it needs something called an animated controller, which is our next terminology. And basically it's an arrangement of animations and transitions. As you'll see, sometimes it acts like a state machine. We've discussed that before. And you need an animation. That is the actual animation. The animation gets put into the animator controller, and then the animator controller goes in the component. And it all starts with the sprite renderer that actually displays the 2D sprite. So let's go and create these 3 objects and make an animation. Back now in Unity, make sure your character is selected in the hierarchy. And we're going to add a component. And we'll search for animator. And we're not the animation. The animator component is what we're adding. And you can see here that the animator component needs a controller. So we will be making that shortly, and then we'll make an animation. We put the animation in the controller, and the controller goes here, and everything works together. Before we do all that, we need a couple extra windows that we're going to put down here. So go to Window, and come down to Animation, and choose Animation. And I'm going to drag it down here to the bottom. Actually, I'll drag it over to the side over here. Give it a little extra room like that. The other window we need is under animation as well. It's the animator, animation, animator. And I'm gonna drag this one down here as well. So we'll be using these 2 tabs here shortly. Okay. So back over here to my sprites. Maybe they're still open for you. Mine were still open. You want to click this arrow to make sure you see all the actual idle sprites that we have. And I'm going to select the first one. Hold down Shift and select the last one. They're all selected there. This is the easiest way to make an animation. If you select all the sprites, then you right click and create an animation right there. It's going to ask what you want to name it. I'm going to call it idle. And I'm going to move it into my animations folder over here. And I'm going to go and select it. You can see in the animation window now there's these keyframes that have been added. We can't see a sprite yet because there's not a sprite associated with this. If I open it up, oh, there's the sprite. I can see that there's a sprite associated with it yet. But I want to see a preview, and I can't see one yet because it needs a model down here to preview it. All you have to do is drag your character from the hierarchy into this little play window. Then you can kind of play it, and you can see your character do its little animation. That's great. My animation is working. Now I need an animation controller. So I'm going to, in my animations folder, right click, create an animator controller. Animator controller is what I want. And I'm going to name this my character controller. And with it selected, I'm going to click on the animator window. And notice there's some things in here. There's some states that are already in here. I'll kind of zoom in a little bit so we can see them. You got an any state, you got an entry state, and you have an exit state. The only one we're going to be using right now is the entry state. And to do that, all we do is drag idle into the animator, and it makes a link from entry to idle. So that means whenever this animator is entered, when we start to use it, it's going to run this idle animation. And now how do we link that up? Well, we just go to my character. And right now it needs a controller, and here I did my character controller. I'm just going to drag it in there. And now I'll push play. And we should see our character animate. There we go, it animated, but it only animated once. What we want to do is loop the animation, which is very simple to do. So I will stop playing my game there. I'm going to click on my idle animation and go over to my inspector and just put a check mark at loop time, and I'll play it again, and it should animate continuously. There we go. That looks pretty good. Next, let's create the walking animation. So we'll do it similar to last time. I'm going to go to my assets folder and find character animation, and then there's run. So I'll open up run, and I have 1 time and 2 time. I'm going to use 1 time. First, I'm going to click on the 1 time here and change the pixels per unit to 48. And a similar process that we just went through. I'm going to rename this. So I'll right click and rename. And this is walk. And I'm going to move it to my sprites folder. So I've got a sprites folder there. I'm going to move walk into my sprites folder. Okay, go to my sprites folder now. Close up my idle sprite. Here's my walk sprite. And just like last time, I have to cut it up. Right now, it's just 1 image, right? Whereas our idle sprite was 1 image and we cut it all up. So do the same with our walking sprite. To do that, you go up here to the sprite mode, choose multiple. Go ahead and I gotta apply, and then go to the sprite editor. Again, I go to slice, keep it on automatic, and I just click slice. Now if I click down here, each one of these has been sliced up. I just click apply now and close the window. Now if I open up walk, you should see that there are a bunch of different walk animations here. Walk animation sprites, I should say. So I'm going to select the first one by clicking it. I'm going to hold down shift and click the very last one. So they're all selected. I will right click and we will create an animation from this. I'm going to name it walk. And then I'm going to move the walk animation to my animations folder. Drag it right into there. I'll go to my animations folder. Double click the character, the my character animator. So it should be open over here. You should see it's got the idle animation that we had earlier. I'm going to drag the walk animation. I'm just going to drag it in up here on the top. It's just going to sit here by itself. It's not going to be attached to anything, but that's where we need it now. If you were to play right now, it's not going to play the walk animation. It's only going to play the idle animation. To get to the walk animation, we're going to have to write a script for that. But first, let's go to the walk animation, and there it is. I could just play it and see if it's working. Yeah, there it is. That looks pretty good. Okay, this video is getting kind of long, so we'll do the script in the next video.